So greetings from Finland. I'm living here in central Finland, in Jyväskylä, where I am a researcher in university, and I'm conducting a research group which focuses on wisdom and learning. It has been about 5 years in our university. It is located in a Finnish Institute for Educational Research, which actually conducts the famous PISA research by OECD. So I'm currently in the same institution. And now I'm going to tell you something about psychological wisdom research. My own background is both in psychology, developmental psychology, and especially in adult development. And also I have the highest degree in philosophy. So I have integrated my two interests here. I'm interested in both. And actually, as you will see, they come surprisingly close nowadays. So researchers on psychology have increased interest in philosophical question. And I really hope that if you have something which is unclear to you during my presentation, please ask about it. You can raise your hand or something so I can see that there's something which must be reflected more in my presentation. So now I start the presentation. Do you see now it? Yep. So I have a PhD in the psychology. In developmental psychology, I trained a group of university students in our university, and I tried to demonstrate that their thinking develop in the university studies. And I was successful in my PhD, so I demonstrated it experimentally. But after that, I changed my interests from thinking to the wisdom, and the tasks I was given by tasks given by tools are twofold, and I think as a philosopher you could also have very good questions about these psychological things. So there can be some kind of debate or criticism almost about everything. But what I'm going to say now next. The first question is, what is psychological wisdom and how could it be defined? And I think the most important thing is in education nowadays, is it possible to teach it and learn it? The most common definition of wisdom, I think, is that it is, I think, across almost all domains or disciplines, scientific discipline, because wisdom is not only studied in psychology, it's also studied in sociology, in some part philosophy, of course, but also in cultural sciences. And they all share, I think, the common definition, and that is that wisdom is some kind of ideal state of development of humanity. And it's like an optimum or high goal, some kind of the highest value or virtue which can be achieved during human development. And it has a very long historical background, as you surely know. In our cultural background, European background, in mythology, in religions, And almost in every culture, there's some kind of bank of wisdom. For example, in some kind of sayings or wise words, which are taught to the young generations. So it's a common phenomenon, but it's also a universal phenomenon. It has been found in every culture. Every culture has some kind of ideal behavior, which could be defined as wise. And as I said, you must remember that it's not in any way tied only or limited only to one discipline. And now I am going just to discuss about it, about a psychological viewpoint, and after that from educational viewpoint. All these photos actually are from Pallas Athene, who has been a god of wisdom in ancient Greece. And from the viewpoint of cultural sciences, the symbolism connected to the Pallas Athene's person are very interesting, because the symbols she have some kind of double meaning, which have some kind of implicit meaning what wisdom can be understood. But now to the psychological wisdom part. I think I must say something about how psychology is defined currently. For the most part, it is about our outer behavior in our environment, but also about our inner experiences. So I think it has double meaning. It can be also, at the same time, it can be understood from the observer's viewpoint, from the third person's ontology, and at the same time from inner experiences from the first person's ontology. And mostly the methods which are nowadays used in psychology are directly borrowed from the natural sciences. So, for example, observation is understood as an observation from another viewer's viewpoint. But for example, phenomenological observation, which is qualitative method in psychology, it is not so commonly used in this field. It's in much lesser role, and the methods are mostly statistical. So if something is understood from one's behavior, outer behavior, and perceived and understood and conceptualized, the phenomenon is in a way generalized to the larger group via the statistical methods. Psychology in itself, it's a very large area nowadays. It's growing all the time. For example, it includes neuropsychology, personality and social psychology, cognition, developmental psychology, and especially clinical psychology, which is one of the major practical applications nowadays, including psychotherapy and consulting. So about psychological wisdom research, it started about 3 decades ago. I remember it quite clearly. First, empirical reports were published in psychological journals, and nowadays it is so common theme that when I yesterday made a Google Scholar search, there were about 1,400,000 hits. So the crucial or very important questions, and which could also be very critical here, are 2 questions. What is wisdom in psychology, how it's defined, and how it is psychologically manifested in our behavior and in experiences. The first thing is very critical, because I know that there are some scholars all around the world who claim that the only original source to trace wisdom is actually only philosophy. So you can't trace it from psychological phenomena at all. But most the scholars who have been who are on the field of psychology, they don't care. They don't care about this this criticism, and they don't take into account the possible critical questions which have been raised by nowadays quite many philosophers actually. So the psychologists have created very many different models of wisdom, and it can be interpreted either positively or negatively. Some say that the field is so heterogeneous that one can't say anything about some kind of common model of wisdom in psychology. Or it can be also, from positive viewpoint, can be said that the different models give different viewpoints, perspectives to the wisdom. So there can't be any kind of meta model which takes into account all the smaller models. But there have been attempts to create this kind of overall models also as a meta model. During the last 3 decades, there have been models by Bolte, Sternberg, Bassett, Adelt, and Gluck. I think they are the most famous nowadays. And now currently there are some new models growing also, but quite heavily the research is based still on the older models. And this the first one who created this kind of theory of what wisdom could be was Paul Bolte's called Berlin model of wisdom, and he and his colleagues claimed that wisdom imply that you must have some kind of very deep expertise knowledge or pragmatism of life. You must have some kind of box or deep experiences of life. So life experience is the base of this model. And he also claimed that wisdom is quite a heavily cognitive thinking based phenomenon. So and he included in it 2 important key features. So the first is that you can take multi-perspective viewpoints, and you must reflect all those viewpoints and try to integrate them in a way or other. After him, Robert Sternberg claimed quite I think this is quite close to the Bolte's model. He thinks that so-called tacit knowledge, hidden, almost unconscious knowledge of our life experience is the base of our wisdom, and we trace and take from that experience all the wise insights we can get in the life. And he also claimed that wisdom is one kind of balance between different interests and different time frames, time perspectives, which we must in some way put together and integrate and put them into action. And the final goal should always be ethical. So you must urge for common good, otherwise your action is not wise action. if you are looking only for your own benefits, you are not a wise person. And then there are 3 women, and I think they agree with those Baltes and Sternberg that there is a strong cognitive and reflective component in wisdom, but they all added emotions to the picture. That wisdom is not only some kind of cognition or thinking thing, but you must have some kind of either empathy or compassion and some kind of positive social emotions towards others. So these 5 models are the base of the whole wisdom theoretization now. And the current models, they are coming quite many, actually. There's almost competition between scholars who try to create all of them newer models. They are quite similar, like the older ones. So I don't go them more here. Just this Igor Grossman, who is from Canada, he's professor there, quite a rising star in this field. He claims that wisdom is constructed with 2 things. First, about with that multi-perspective thinking, and then about integration of those perspectives, and secondly about ethical actions. And you see here, when you look at the right, this is one kind of tasks he used to empirically find how do you reason wisely in these kind of situations. This is very common type of problems which are used in wisdom research. So these are called so-called ill-defined, complex, or evil problems. These are very difficult to solve so-called right. They aren't not so right answers often, and you must ponder and reflect all the necessary things needed to solve this kind of problems. This problem has been divided to two kinds of problems, actually. This can be read from your perspective. So the first person's ontology. You are trying to solve about the problem of your own life, or you can also put these tasks from third person's ontology about your friend or partner's situation. I will come back to this example later, because there's certain difference between how you can, from which ontology you try to solve this problem. And this Grossman's model of wise thinking, it has 4 components, and one of them I think is very known from the times of Socrates: intellectual humility. So if you understand, you go out of your own perspectives, and you understand that there are multiple perspectives of the same phenomenon. It implies that you understand that there are limits of your knowledge, and that means that you are humble intellectually, do the truth claims. And it also implies that there is some kind of uncertainty. You can't be 100% sure about everything, and especially in these ill-defined problems. But in the end, you must, for the sake of pragmatics and for the sake of or doing or action in the world, you must some kind of search for some kind of integration or compromise of these perspectives. So this is very common, and it is also in Baltes and Sternberg's model, and also that in Ardel's and other women researchers models, the same thing. So I don't think this is that new one, but I think it's very clear. So you can see there's some kind of there's some kind of what is that in English? Some kind of philosophy and psychology come very close here because of these humility things and uncertainty and change or knowledge and like that. But there have also been some integration attempts of these separate models. One of the latest is Sarah Karami from Iran, and there have been a try to integrate different features and try to create some kind of meta model which includes all these different components, which has been claimed in former models. A bit earlier, Bangen, Mix, and Geste also make some kind of analysis of these different models, and here in the right, you see that there are some features which seems to be common in many models. For example, the first, that you are able to social decision making in different in difficult situation, and you have some kind of pragmatic knowledge of life is the most used definition. This social decision making is based on this, as I showed you, the Grossman's model means the others' perspectives and a broader context must be taken into account. It means the same as the first here on the right. And secondly, those pro-social attitudes and behaviors, it's very common that a wisdom can't be something which is...
there's the question.
Yep.
For clarification, I suppose.
I just wanted to know, because it's quite hard to see the pictures, would it by any chance be able to get them from neutral site?
Okay, so this is because it's hard to read, and so I'm just going to say that it's actually being filmed. Så att det kommer finnas, det filmas. Så jag kommer läggas ut på YouTube. Det är jättebra, jag skulle sagt det förstås. Jo, men det är svårt. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
You can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. So the second one is about these pro-social attitudes and ability to behave in a way that is for common good. And third, it's very important, a cognitive component. You must reflect and have some kind of insight of yourself, self-understanding. You must reflect over your experiences. That doesn't matter if you don't reflect and think about them. And the fourth is acknowledgement and dealing effectively with uncertainty and ambiguity. So these are I think that the first four are the most important. They are almost in every model of wisdom. Then the education part. Is it possible to teach and learn wisdom? This is quite an interesting question. Nowadays there are two scholars, Nicholas Maxwell from Britain, who has been very eager to publish plenty of books about wisdom, and he claims that the role of universities in general hasn't been understood quite right. Their task is not just spread knowledge or teach knowledge, but they must teach wisdom to the students in the universities. And Robert Sternberg, which was already mentioned, he has also written a book about wisdom education, and he say that we must understand how we apply the knowledge we get or learn in university. The applications and ethical application is the most important, but it is not actually taught at all in university. So I think this is my own remark, that there is some kind of coming back to the idea of Bildung university, meaning some kind of that university student should self-cultivate or self-develop in university studies. They are not just only for professional markets after the university, but they must also develop as human beings. Currently, there are different viewpoints. Is it possible actually to teach wisdom? There are some scholars who claim that it can't be taught at all. Some claim it can go taught partly, not wholly. Some think that it can be only learned through one's own practice, and this learning make the base of a life experience, which is mentioned in many of the models, as you saw in Sternberg's model, the pragmatics of life and expertise knowledge, and in Sternberg's model it was tacit knowledge. And fourthly, there are scholars who claim that wisdom can be intentionally self-cultivated. And these are two late empirical studies. The first one is not so important. It is very, very small group of students, only 23. And they followed high school students for some weeks, and they had some educational methods to try to educate wisdom. For example, some kind of guided discussion about one person's biography, what we can learn about it, learning diaries and reflection, and autobiographical writing were the methods, and no difference. The result was 0. There isn't any effect. But Sarma and Devangen a few years ago were more successful, and they had about 104 students, which is quite good. They kept a training study for management students about 18 weeks. It included mindfulness exercises, leadership virtues. The students wrote learning journals, and they had all the time a class discussion. And they focused on certain leadership virtues, like deep honesty, moral vision and courage, selflessness, compassion and caring, intellectual strength, creative thinking, fairness and justice. But they didn't find any effect on this study. And the only problematic thing is here that they didn't have experimental design in this study. They only focused on one group, and they followed it, but nothing else. So Monica Ardelt, who is one of the most famous actually nowadays with her model, made this longitudinal study with her one student, quite a good number of students, about over 300 college students in the States, and she had an experimental design. It lasted about 1 semester, and they used adults so-called 3D questionnaire, which includes which define wisdom as a integration of reflection, cognition, and compassion. They used that questionnaire in the pre and final and measurement. They have different methods: reading and discussion, from philosophy, religion, wisdom, cultures, class discussion, reflective journals, in 2 ways. The students also wrote about their personal philosophy, and they tried also develop active discussion and listening others. These are the texts they used. For example, Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Stoic example, Confucian philosophy, Dhammapada, Buddhism, Christianity, something about philosophical practice, Jules Evans, and like that. And the results showed that it was in line with hypothesis. There was increase of wisdom in experimental group, but not in uncontrolled group. So this has been so far the most successful experimental research in this area. It seems so that with a certain educational techniques, you can raise some forms of wisdom, some domains. But there are still problems in that research, and I think the future, some scholars are doing more research of this, because it's now difficult to distinguish which teaching methods are the most effective in that training. There were quite many, and it's not known what is the effect of the teacher. And did she measure actually the whole phenomenon of wisdom? Because it was based only on her model. And they have also published separate article about the main methods which they used in the training. And shortly they are challenging beliefs, which I think is a very basically philosophical method, I think. And also I think the second is very important, how they verbalize their values and how often we do that, honestly, actually. And encouraging self-development, self-improvement, and encouraging self-reflection, as I said earlier, reflection of life and experience is one of the most important methods to rise and develop your wisdom. Also cultivating model emotions like empathy and compassion and like that. And some 2 auxiliary methods, adjunct methods, like reading these texts, which was mentioned, like Buddhist and Confucian are like that. And the second auxiliary method is of discussion. There's some kind of free space of free discussion. But there are also, I'm sorry, I'm over my time, but I must say this, there are also other cultivation methods of wisdom besides of these school-based training studies. The first of them is called decentration techniques. And I think this is quite well demonstrated nowadays. There are many studies which has demonstrated this, that if you are in problem situation, putting yourself in your friends or in other person's perspective on your own problems is very effective method actually. For example, if you write down your problem and then you change me from, for example, she or he there, it changes your perspective, and you can see the thing in a different perspective, in different background and situation. And as I mentioned Grossman earlier here as one of the models of wise thinking, he used that story about that unfaithfulness, and if you read that story from your viewpoint and after that from others' viewpoint, participants show greater tendency to reason wisely in situation concerning another person than concerning oneself. So we are quite blind to ourselves. So it's not wise to get stuck in one's own situation without any other perspectives to do that. And other cultivation methods are, for example, in Eastern spiritual traditions, some non-discursive forms. They are not always discursive or based on language and thinking. If you take into account embodied wisdom, so you can reach wisdom with your bodily cultivation, for example, in yoga, tai chi, qigong, and martial arts are good examples of this. They are all based on this. And also other contemplative and meditation traditions, of course, including mindfulness, are counted in these non-discursive forms. In the Western philosophical and spiritual tradition, there are some semi-contemplative methods, for example, Catholic Lectio Divina, and its derivatives, for example, Rand Lahav, who is philosophical practitioner, as you know, I think, has created a so-called deep philosophy movement, which is actually quite close to the Lectio Divina tradition. I've been involved actually in that deep philosophy group for about 2 years, and so I know something about that. But there are also discursive forms in Western tradition, like Socratic dialogue in its various forms. Also, other cultivation methods are, for example, imaginary tasks. So you are, for example, asked to imagine yourself sitting on the cloud and traveling around the globe in different cultures. It seems to raise your wisdom according to empirical studies. But there's some kind of difference if you reflect more on customs in these various cultures or countries. It is a more effective way if you reflect those things you see from the cloud. Also, the old Stoic, was it Stoic or Hellenistic spiritual technique, or seeing oneself from cosmos or above, is one of these imagery tasks. And in difficult situation, you can imagine yourself looking down from cosmos at your situation. So it's very close to the decentration methods. You take another perspective, which is universal and cosmopolitic. And also other cultivation methods, this is very important actually, any master-student type of relationships. And when you adapt a role of the teacher, for example, in martial arts, it's very important to have a shifu, a master, or some kind of teacher, which is older, which is more experienced than you, and he can or she can teach you many things in a very long and slow period of time. But this kind of relationships also exist actually in modern culture, in counseling, in psychotherapy, in mentoring, in all these kind of relationships, because teaching orients you beyond self, and it teaches the teacher and it teaches the students. So these kind of human relationships, social relationships are important way to transfer this tacit and exercise knowledge which we all have all life, and we can give them to the others, help for others. And here is the citation: phronesis can't be taught in any lecture theatre, but must be lived through. In fact, it's rather closer to an apprenticeship or mentoring relationship, in which the wisdom of the mentor is embedded in the novice over time, but only indirectly through guided practice or engagement, not directly from formal teaching. I think I can end here, if Tulsa it's okay.
Är det pågående forskning eller är det ett avslutat publicerat projekt?
Vilket hela alltet. So Eeva, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
So this is a question regarding if it's an ongoing project, the one that you are presenting on Wisdom and Learning, I suppose that's what, yeah, or if it's a finished one.
Which project do you mean?
So, but do you have an ongoing project right now?
You see my sharing, don't you? These are the projects.
Yeah.
So in the first project, we are following university students. It will be a longitudinal study, and we are following their wisdom development. We have created our integrated wisdom model and the questionnaire about it, and we are following from the beginning to the end of the university students studies. And then there's another project which is focused on children's wisdom. Is it possible to see wisdom in children? And then there's a Socratic dialogue project. We are experimenting Socratic dialogue in our teacher training unit in our university. And also we have collected data about university staff's wisdom experiences from their work life in university. And also there's one who is studying information technology wisdom.
Så svaret är att det pågår finns flera projekt som hon driver själv. Okay, great, thank you. I have many questions, but I have many questions, but I think maybe I can address them to you afterwards as we're running out of time. So you mentioned that you the idea of wisdom as an unattainable goal, this vision, yeah. So, would you say what are your reflections on that? Can you achieve wisdom and can you surpass it, or I mean, in the sense, can you be too wise? Oh. I'm not sure if maybe we lost connection now. Can you hear me? Okay. Eeva, I don't know if you can hear me, but we lost connection, it seems like. So that was a really poetic ending. So thank you so much, Eeva. And yeah, okay. Hi, Eeva. Thank you so much. You froze in that picture and actually kind of running out of time. But so I figured that was a very poetic ending because you said, but do you have an answer to that? Did you get my question?
No, I don't know.
Can you attain wisdom at all, or is it just an unattainable goal to strive towards?
Oh yes, yes. I was saying that it was. I think in phronetic sense, in phronesis, we all are wise in a way. But in transcendental wisdom, I am not sure.
Okay, that was a super short and concise answer. So thank you so much, and super interesting. Thank you so much, Eeva. And I don't know if you heard the applause, but here they are again.
Thank you.